morning, ladies and gentlemen. Great pleasure to have Chris with us. I think first time at the conference, Chris.
It is, indeed. They tried to give me one of the pins, but I realized you're only allowed to have a pin if you've been to every conference, so I thought that would be misleading. It is my first time here. Great to be with you. Great to be here at Nassetta.
Caribbean
with you. Yeah,
Caribbean. I know you were down experiencing magical Kenya.
I was
directly yourself with the Minister Najib Balala this morning. How did you find that?
I had a chance to practice some of my dance moves. I've been in Kenya and Nairobi for 24 hours, and I've danced 3 times since I've been here. If my wife were to see that after she finished, a huge amount of laughter, she'd realize she's been trying to get me to dance, for years, and I don't do a lot of it. The fact that I've done 3 dances in 24 hours, I think she'd be impressed by it.
I can tell you.
Magical Kenya was great to answer the questions. It was wonderful to be with Secretary Balala and the Secretary General of the UNWTO and a lot of other folks from around the continent of Africa, in addition to Kenya, to celebrate, what's a spectacular opportunity here, obviously in Kenya and Nairobi, but also all around Africa, which I know you guys are talking a lot about here.
Yeah, well, we all love it, obviously, that's why we're all here. The theme of the conference this year is invest, create, and conserve, and I just want to make sure we sort of touch on all those, but perhaps if we just start sort of a little bit big picture. You folks are celebrating 100 years next year. Spreading the light and warmth of hospitality.
We are indeed. It's fun and exciting to be leading or even part of the company, in the sense that not many companies, when you really think about it, celebrate 100 years. They don't make it that far. And, in our case, obviously I've been at the company only 11 years, so it's not like I created this thing. I feel like I've contributed, but millions of people have contributed their hearts and souls over a long time. And our founder, who was a pretty inspirational guy, if you look out the window, look up the hill, and you think about the nerve it took and the pioneering spirit it took to be here in Nairobi 50 years ago, think about it that way, to be at the Hilton on the African continent 60 years ago. Nobody was doing that. And what today seems like is simple, and of course you do it. Back in the day, he was really ahead of the curve and very much a pioneer. And I think the fun part about celebrating our 100th year anniversary, more fun I suspect for we at Hilton than all the rest of you, but since I'm on stage, you have to suffer through hearing me talk about it. Conrad Hilton had a really simple philosophy, if you go back and read the history of the company, and that is he really believed in his heart and his mind that travel could make the world a better place, and with a fundamental belief that if you create an opportunity for safe and secure environments where people could have what they needed from a functionality and service point of view all over the world, then it would stimulate travel, which would stimulate exchange of ideas and greater knowledge of cultures, as between different peoples around the world. And I would say he was right, and our company has played a meaningful role here in Nairobi, the Hilton, but all over the world as pioneering new locations. And my belief is that as much as we're celebrating 100 years, it's really always about the future. Certainly my shareholders, while they would love to do a few high fives on the great 100 years, all they care about is the future.
Next 100.
Our customers care about the next 100. Our team members, we're looking for opportunities to care about the next 100. And so in that way, it's really exciting in the sense that Hilton is in a really good place. We're growing all over the world. We have spectacular brands, I think the best brands in the business. And while we're widely distributed, if you look at the numbers, 5,400 hotels, almost 900,000 rooms around the world, so we're one of the biggest in the world. There are certainly parts of the world, including where I sit, which is why I'm here, where I would argue, notwithstanding a 60-year history on the African continent, we're just getting started. I mean, we have, 50, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, so
Nick knows I'm great at a filibuster, so I'll let you ask the question.
Chris is one of the easiest guys to interview. You probably say good morning and you get going. 5,500.
You're pretty good yourself.
5,500 Yeah, we're trying to see, there's someone keeping score at the back. Patrick's keeping minutes scored, and whoever loses, we don't know what the rewards for losing is, but it might be good.
A dance on stage.
Yeah, no fellow dusters. 5,500 hotels, nearly 900,000 rooms. But the pipeline, and I know that's one of your favorite topics, and I don't want to miss out on that. Can we pop the pipeline up for Africa?
Saves you the numbers right.
Yeah, well, you're going to have to count them now.
All right. Well, I know the pipeline around the world.
Yeah, so around the world, you've got 2,500, nearly 400,000 rooms. Is it true that you're expecting the development guys to deliver 1 million rooms in your 100?
Absolutely, it is true. And Patrick to do most of it here in Africa.
Because he hasn't got much to do.
He doesn't. Well, Africa's interesting, as I was getting ready to say before you interrupted me there. We have a long history, longer I think than anybody, certainly the major brands, but and we're big. You had 900,000 rooms and all the stats we talked about, but we're not big here. I mean, our brands are well known here, but we're not big. And so what that is opportunity knocking. Because if you look at the stats, and everybody's here, I assume for the same reason I'm here, is just a gargantuan growth opportunity. If you look at, like, fast forward, everybody around the global hospitality industry has been talking a lot about Asia. I know here we're talking about Africa, but if you were to sort of, figure out scientifically where a lot of the discussion's been, it's been around Asia, because that's just been a gargantuan growth opportunity over the last 10 or 20 years. Well, reality is Africa is much the same, in my opinion, has been high growth, but I think the next 20 years could be exponential growth. And Africa for some really basic reasons, and that is urbanization over the next 20 years, looking at any stats, is expected to be the greatest year on the African continent. The top 10, as a consequence of that, the top 10 fastest growing cities in the world over the next 20 years should be African cities. In terms of working age population, over the next 20 years, the working age population in Africa will be greater than either of China or India, and that's hard to do. There are a lot, 1.3 billion people in each of those countries. And importantly for everybody in the room, you can argue these stats, we look at this stuff in my role as chair of WTDC, but if you look at international inbound tourism to Africa, which is circa 50 or 60 million right now, most of the numbers show that over the next 20 years it will double or triple. But having said that, everybody in this room knows you can add up all the big brands, all the global brands, and certainly they're local brands and they're represented in this room and they're relevant in lots of ways. But I think there's opportunity, obviously, for the big global brands. You add up all the global brands and their entire presence on the continent. I think it's like 600 hotels. Yeah. So what I would argue is, massive under-penetration. And so huge demand growth over a very protracted period of time against what is limited supply, certainly from for the big global brands, means gargantuan opportunity. And so I think the next 20 years, if we do our job, even though we've been here a long time, we will experience exponential growth. And Patrick, wherever he is, does his job, and Mike, Kalini, our team, there they are smiling, we'll double our presence here in Africa in the next 5 years. And I think that's not a pipe dream, because we have a pipeline.
I just counted the dots while you were talking, and I see.
You're good at math, yeah. You see about 60, a little less.
Yeah, I get 41 open and roughly 11,000 rooms.
Yeah, that's about right.
And about 53 in the pipeline with a similar number.
I just
did that.
I value liberally on behalf of my development.
No, we can ask Patrick. It's pretty accurate, isn't it? Yeah, thank you. So that's doubling your portfolio.
That is.
So interesting, yesterday, there were a couple of very interesting stats that came out. So one was that we're expecting Africa, just to keep pace with current forecasts of population growth, we'll have to create 50,000 jobs per day, if you can believe that. And there are only 4 countries in the entire continent with 50,000 or more rooms, which was also a remarkable sort of stat. So, the opportunity is huge. I know that if you're looking at your pipeline, Hilton, obviously, your core brand is still a key part of that, but also Garden Inn and DoubleTree, particularly Garden Inn.
Particularly Garden Inn.
where do you see the opportunity for that?
Yeah, I mean, we're, again, in the category of just getting started. We've got a couple Hilton Garden Inns. I think 16 of the 53 you saw in that pipeline are Garden Inn. But in many of the markets around Africa, I mean, obviously, if the market was supported, just like it did in Nairobi.
I meant cities, obviously.
Yeah, we want to do a core Hilton brand because you've got the broadest awareness of any hospitality brand on earth, including here in Africa. But the reality is, even though cost to build here may not be as much as it is in other parts of the world, the economics don't support it, in as many markets as you would like. And so Hilton Garden Inn, in effect, becomes the next best thing. It obviously has the Hilton brand awareness front and center because it is Hilton Garden Inn. And from a cost to build, rate structure, and the like, it comes in underneath from a operating cost point of view. Given it is a limited service concept, it will drive higher margins, and the economics in many markets around Africa will support it. So I suspect when you wake up in 5 or 10 years, the bulk of our growth will be in the limited service, what we call focused service segment. It won't all be just Garden Inn. I think it'll start with that, and we want to build a network effect. And then DoubleTree, which is full service, but we ultimately will bring Hampton by Hilton to this market. I don't think it makes sense to do it until we get Garden Inn going. Here's the other thing when you talk about limited service, I say this all the time. We all, many of us like to stay in high-end hotels and luxury hotels, and gosh, I do, like staying in Waldorf's, Conrad's, it's wonderful, but the reality is, if you look at Africa, if you look at Asia, frankly, if you look at even the more mature markets, you look at America and Europe, the bulk of demand growth in our industry now, and I would say for the rest of everybody's life in this room, is going to be mid-market. So what does that mean? And particularly in emerging markets like Africa, throughout the continent, throughout Asia, it's mid-market. Well, mid-market means, it's coming out of the growth in the middle class, which in many emerging markets is exponential growth. What can they afford? Mid-price brands. That's where the demand's going to be. So not only do I think when we wake up, say fast forward 20 years, the bulk of our growth, that doesn't mean we're not going to do a lot of other brands. We're going to do plenty of Hiltons that will always lead the way for us. We're going to do plenty of DoubleTrees, and we'll bring other brands beyond Garden into this market. We have a Curio, opening. I'm going to be Friday opening in Lagos Airport. So we'll have lots of other brands, but if you look at the density by room count, if you fast forward 10 or 20 years, it will be in the mid-market. And that will be true in every major geography in the world, simply because that's where the demand is. In our, in our business model, not surprisingly, we've got a lot of our partners and investors here. We're not building these things, both because we can't have enough local expertise, plus our model is a capital-light model. So what we're trying to do is match, the demand patterns that we see with capital to make magic, which is deliver a great product, and great service relative to what the customer wants, but then to make sure that our real estate partners are getting adequate returns to want to continue to invest capital. Well, that means we got to be really smart about making sure that we are matching, that we are building the right products in the right place at the right time, cost to build, cost to operate, margins, profitability, support the underlying investment. And that will be lots of different brands in Africa. In the end, I suspect, when we wake up in 10 years, we'll have at least half of our core portfolio here. But if you look at the rooms, it will be a lot of limited service.
So just picking up on something you said there, so obviously building smart. I know you guys are doing quite a lot in that field. Innovation, the industry perhaps is not particularly renowned as, it's basically...
we're the industry that gave you like 3-inch foam mattresses and floral bedspreads.
Correct.
And we thought that was innovation.
It's difficult to identify.
I think it's better now. I do think it's better.
What do you think? What are you folks doing in that area?
Call me crazy, but what we're doing is we're listening to our customers a lot more. I think the history we've gotten is we don't have time to do it all, but the long history of our industry has really been about sort of iconic leaders, judging what they thought customers wanted, because the industry was not mature, and really, in some ways, the customers didn't know what they wanted because it was an evolving industry. Well, here's the thing. Even in emerging markets, it's a much more mature industry. Customers, everybody stays in hotels. everybody knows what their needs are, what their likes and dislikes are. So the industry, and certainly we at Hilton, need to pay a lot more attention to what